Well, hello, gang. I have some exciting news to share with you today. Today, we're going to sit down and we're going to break down one of my personal EDH decks. Uh, and we're going to go over a little breakdown of everything that I've chosen so far and a little bit of reasons why. Pretty excited about this. Get to share one of my own personal creations. I'm going to share with you today kind of a little baby of mine in a sense and form. Pretty excited about that. Today, I'm going to share with you Baby Boom Boom. Otherwise known as Child of Alara. This is my 5-color EDH deck. Before we get started, I have made a lot of these decisions based upon a little bit of my playgroup and the fact that a lot of the cards kind of have a personal meaning to specifically me. I can't exactly show you all of the exact cards per se, as you know. For instance, my child is all foiled out and pretty sweet. So some of the cards have an actual meaning, whereas I can't really show you all of them here. So let's give you a little window pane here so we can go across every little bit here in details. We'll move that over here somewhere. There we go. Right there. I like it right there. So that way we'll be able to see all the card details. And if there's something pretty sweet about one of my cards, for instance, I have the deck right here in front of me. I'll share a little bit of a little bit about it. For instance, we'll go over a little bit of the land base here in a minute, and I'll show you a couple of specifics on why I've chosen these particular ones over the other. But a little basis details for everyone before we get started. Again, this is an EDH deck of my personal making, and it is based upon my play group and a little bit of rules from my play group. With that being said, one of the rules of my play groups is that we don't really like mass land destruction spells. So we're not going to see any mass land destruction spells in any of my decks for EDH. We're also not going to see any taking turn spells. We have basically barred those for the most part from our play group. And another thing that you'll notice is I set a little personal bar on myself when it comes to deck building for my EDH decks. I try not to use the same cards in any of my decks, other than your obvious ones like your soul rings, your lands, and some of the obvious ones that you can't get around. So when we look at a lot of my deck texts, which this is going to be the first one for you guys, I'll be putting out a couple more. So with that being said, you'll start seeing differences, and you'll wonder why I didn't pick this card for this particular deck, and the answer is probably because it's sitting in another one of my decks. With those criteria being set apart, if anyone ever has any comments for you YouTubers, drop it into the the comment section. I would love to hear your comments about asking me, like, why did I pick this one, or have you thought about this one, or what's the exact purpose of this card exactly. I would love to have those. For the people here on Twitch, feel free to drop it in the chat. I will answer any questions that are here right now for you guys. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and start with the land base, and we'll move our way across. I am by no means saying that this land base is 100% correct, but I've had no issues with it, so I don't see any reason to change it. I'm actually missing a card now that I look at it, and this one's sitting right here. That one wasn't supposed to be there. What are you doing, little buddy? Interesting. We'll start with our lands. We'll start with here in the 17 pile, you'll see Vivids, one of each color. And kind of the reasons why I have Vivids is because when I first started, I ended up getting Vivids for the deck. This deck's been through a lot of different iterations, and this is where it's landed. But when I first started, I picked up Vivids to help with the mana base because I didn't have the money for all these other fancy cards. And so, again, you'll see a Vivid Meadow, a Vivid Marsh, a Vivid Grove, a Vivid Creek, and a Vivid Crag. But as like I've gotten more new cards for the deck, I've been able to upgrade them. But the Vivids have stayed in the deck because they're, as you can kind of see from here, maybe not so much, but they're of different languages, and they're German and Italian vivids, and it's kind of a little bit of my heritage. So I've been able to put that into the deck. It kind of left it there. And that's why I was talking about, like, the deck has a little personal touch to me. There's a little bit of personal cards, some of my favorite ones in here, and some that look really awesome in the promos that I have. So that's why they've decided to, stay into the deck over other things. Specifically, we can also hit, like, there's Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. Again, I picked those up when I first started, and they're the promos of each, and they're really, really sweet, so I enjoyed them. So I've kept them in there, along with the fact there's a couple other cards that play with basics that I like to have. So we go down the Vivids, and then you'll hit Mazes In. This is a Mazes In deck, 100% Mazes In deck. So it's going to play your Mazes In along with your 10 and the brand new one of 11th Gates. The 11th one now being the Gateway Plaza. For me, all of my gates and gateway plazas are all full out, no doubt about it. I've picked and chosen my favorite artworks of each of those lands because they've given, a lot of different alternative options for us to choose from for the gates. So I don't personally have my specific ones picked out here, but as you can see, you've got one of each of the guild gates, and then you have the gateway plaza here. So that'll give you a total of 11 gates. So when you crack your mazes in and you go through the details of the spell of returning mazes into your owner's hand, you search your library for a gate and you get to put it on the battlefield, and then you shuffle your library. If you control 10 or more gates, there are now 11. So you don't need to specifically have all 10 of the guild gates, with Gateway Plaza also being a gate. It gives you the 11th one, which allows the fact of, like, land destruction or some sort of land exile spell to kind of ruin you and set you off from your things that you're doing. So you have that ability to still work with the deck and all. Moving on to the lands, we have an Academy Ruins in the deck, which we'll hit a little bit more on why there's Academy Ruins. There's a Scavenging Ruins because graveyards are huge in EDH, and I don't like going anywhere without some kind of graveyard particular hate. They have an Alchemist Refuge as another one of my utility lands. This is one of the better cards in the deck. I can't think of another card that is probably better than this card. This card is one of the ones that kind of gives the deck the fuel, the motions, the ability to do whatever it wants to do. I have a Boseiju in the deck. Of course, obviously, I'm trying to fight a meta full of blue players, so I want to be able to have my stuff uncounterable, and I want to be able to get my things through. So that's why my Boseiju's there. You have your normal command tower. Again, the Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Events we talked about. I have a Mystifying Maze in the deck as like a little fun of, in case I need to blink things that are attacking me. I do not want Mazes in the deck particularly over this one because I do want the mana. I don't want to have a card that doesn't actually produce mana, and Mystifying Maze is basically a free land in the deck for me to be able to have another, like a utility use to it. Then I've got obviously your Temple of the False Gods. I don't know how you can play an EDH without this deck, or with play an EDH deck without this card. And then we move on to my basics. My basics is 3 forests, 4 islands, 2 plains, and a swamp. The easiest thing you'll notice as we go through the basics and basically the land base as a whole is there's not very many red in here. There's literal no basic red. But you're saying, well, we've got a 5-color deck. Well, yes, we do have a 5-color deck, but there's very, 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 again, very little red in this deck. And so much so that Counterflux is actually the only red card in the deck, along with Child. So I don't need any basic red. As you look through the meta base and you kind of, take a look over through the deck, you'll notice that it is a Esper style deck, splashing green for ramp and red for Counterflux. That's it, for the most part. So you're going to notice that a lot of the lands produce Esper colors, and then green. I needed a lot of green for the early play, so I added some extra forests to be able to cast all my rampant spells, because after I get to past turn 5 or anything like that, I really don't care about the color green. It's just kind of done and over with. So with that being said, we'll move on to our 1-drops. We've got our Soul Ring. Can't play EDH without it. We've got our Sensei's Divining Top. This is currently the only deck I have a top in. I like the filtering, so I don't have a top at all of my decks. This is the one I've chosen to pick the deck with a top in it. Filtering's huge for this deck. Drawing a card when I need to be is very huge. Great card. Can't say anything more about top. And then you'll notice that I have a Spell Bomb here in the deck. Again, I don't like going anywhere without Graveyard Hate. Graveyard Hate is huge. I don't know why people play enough Graveyard Hate in EDH, but this is my choice of Graveyard Hate because it draws me a card. And it exiles for all the cards instead of just single cards. The neat thing I've also chosen this one's particularly for is because of the interaction with Academy Runes that we had talked about earlier. We will find a lot of artifacts in the deck to which we can, just cycle back. So having a Spell Bomb is huge here. And there's another particular reason why it's Spell Bomb over other cards, which we'll get to towards the end when we hit another specific card. Then we're going to run across a Swang Song. Fantastic EDH card, and especially for coming out of this deck, just basically a 1-mana counterspell is huge. I'm not going to go anywhere without Swan Song in my combo decks and my control decks. This is going to counter everything but a creature, and being that the rest of the deck just blows things up, I really just don't care. I just want to counter spells that aren't creatures. So this fits the asking very well. Then we're going to hit a couple removal spells, Pongify and Rapid Hybridization. Both the exact same card, just one gives you a Frog Lizard, the other one gives you a Green Monkey. Again, this is 1-mana removal spells. They are huge because a lot of times I want to be able to cast multiple spells in a turn, and I can't do that if everything costs too much. And that's kind of going to be the theme of why you see my curve is very high in 3s and 4s instead of at the end of the top of the curve as we go along. A little further down, you're going to see the Swords of Plowshare, same reasoning. I want cheap removal spell to be able to answer things and to be able to double spell in a turn. So that way I can counter spell, or I can removal spell, or I can play one of my, cards that get me towards the end of the game while also still being able to hold up interaction. You're going to find a Ponder here just for a little bit of filters. I'm not quite sure whether this card is specifically correct because of the fact that, you're looking at 3 cards isn't super huge. It may be better that we want to do something more specific later on down the road, but for now, Ponder keeps the slot in the deck, and it helps us get through a lot of the gunk sometimes. It gives us an extra draw. You also find the Mystical Tutor to be able to tutor around for just about anything in the deck. Huge card for the deck. Can't really play the deck efficiently without it. And then we're gonna go up Negate. Negate is fantastic in EDH. If you've not considered playing Negate in EDH, Negate is fantastic in EDH. Along with the next card here of Disdainful Stroke, again, fantastic in EDH. Great cards, just gonna counter just about everything in EDH because everything's over 4. And most of the spells that you really want to counter in EDH are either over 4 or they're spells, which Negate will hit. So that's two huge cards for EDH, followed by Cyclonic Rift. I don't even have to talk words about this card. This card's just devastatingly powerful. Followed back up with some more counter spells. We're going to have counter the actual counter spell, and then I think that hits all the counter spells here. You're going to run across a couple removal spells. They're going to be here in black. These cards particularly have stayed in the deck, these two, over anything else because they're pretty sweet promos that I have. So I'm getting to play both of these. So they're still in here in the deck. Followed by a Malicious Affliction. This is a really sweet card. It basically is Doomblade, except with the sometimes potential of taking 2 creatures instead of 1. Can't say how important that is. That's really huge. Then we're going to hit our first ramp spell of the deck. I have chosen Rampant Growth because I've decided to play a lot of basics in the deck over fetch lands and duels and shocks and things of the such. So Rampant Growth makes the cut here. It's also a pretty sweet promo in my deck too. So another reason, I did mention at the offset that there'll be a few reasons why I've chosen specific cards over others. Here's another one of those reasons where I have the sweet promo of the Rampant Growth in the deck. Then we're going to hit 2 artifacts that might seem a little weird, but I have decided to try these. Brain in the Jar. Brain in the Jar is kind of like Aether Vial, but for spells, but not exactly Aether Vial because it doesn't, you have to put mana into it instead of just tapping it and making it happen and waiting over time. So for Brain in the Jar, it's put a counter on Brain in the Jar, then you may cast an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Brain in the Jar from your hand without paying its mana cost. So It starts out with 0 counters on it. You pay 1 mana, you tap it, and then it puts a counter on it, and then you can get to pick a 1-drop in your hand to play that is an instant sorcery. And then the same process will happen each time and over. So the next time you add a mana and put a counter on it, then you get to play 2s, add a mana, put a counter on it, play 3s. The neat thing about this is it lets you play things, sorceries at instant speed, and that's pretty huge for this deck because a lot of the most powerful spells in the deck are sorcery speed, and we want to be able to play them at instant speed so that we can react to our opponent instead of us doing the proactive thing and then probably dying because our opponent taps out and combos off on us. We just don't want that to happen. So Brain in the Jar is huge in this aspect, as it lets us play on our opponent's turn. Which is also why you'll find the Alchemist's Refuge was such a huge card, as it lets us play things on our opponent's turn. Then it has the pretty cool ability of ticking back down, so you remove a couple of charge counters and you'll get the Scry. This card's not like phenomenal, but it really does what I want it to do. It also lets you get around certain like criterias to Fairy. I believe this lets you get around to Fairy, which is pretty sweet, so you then get to... No, I don't think you can. Never mind, just counter all that I'm saying. It's a very sweet card. Let's say you play it instant speed. It gets around a few extra cards in the format that normally you wouldn't be able to do. Then you're gonna have a compass here. Now I've chosen this specific compass because it's just a really sweet card. I really enjoy this card a lot. You get to search your library for basics, and then after you have 7 lands, this thing flips, turns into a Maze of Ith, but it also has the ability of actually tapping for mana. Another huge factor for this deck. Not only does this card ramp you from 7 to 8 sometimes, it also is able to have an interactive spell along with adding you mana. And then this card will let me go get most of my basics out of my deck if I get stumbled. So this is a neat little, like, make sure I don't miss my land drops, ramp me a turn, and then have an interactive spell later on in the game. Great card for this deck. We're going to go on to our 3s, where we're going to hit a couple more of the ramp spells. We're going to find Search Tomorrow and Cultivate. Again, cheap, easy removal or ramp spells is huge. We're just going to get them in, get them out, and get them over with. Let's just ramp all the way up, and then we're just going to be able to have a mana advantage over our opponent. Then we're going to follow up with a couple more counter spells here. I'm going to slide this right in here so I can get them all in together. We're going to find Hinder, Disallow, Void Slime, and Counterflux. All 3 mana counter spells. They all have their purpose. Counterflux is huge. Being able to say no and feel comfortable about it is great. Is super great for us. Void Slime, because its ability to counter activated spells or triggered abilities, is really huge in opportune moments, which is also the reason that Disallow makes the pile here. It does the same thing. Very, very huge in case you need it. Options is huge for this deck. And then you're going to find Hinder. It's not as good as it used to be because it doesn't actually shut down the the commanders anymore. But being able to put a specific card that you don't want to ever see again back on the bottom of their owner's library can be a huge game. Then you're going to run into what we have is the Capsize. Great card. Can't talk about it. It does what it does. So for 3 mana, you get to put a target permanent to its owner's hand, and then for 6 mana, you get to do it and then buy the card back. So you get to keep it in your hand and then just continue doing this over and over and over and over again. This answers a lot of different things for this deck, and I don't think this deck can be played without this Capsize in the deck. Followed by this, we're going to run into a couple card advantage spells with Guild Summit. Guild Summit is fantastic with this deck. The moment I saw this spoiled from the new set, I was like, this has to go in here. This card is great because it gets to play with all the gates. Anytime I get a gate into play, I get to draw a card. Anytime it comes into play and I've got a gate already into play, it's kind of like a little mini Sphinx's Rev for gates. Huge for this deck. More card advantage is great. Then we've got Jace. Now I have chosen Jace as a card advantage card for the deck because I don't really want people to, kind of attack me. I kind of just want to sit back and just kind of dirtle around a little bit and not be the target of spells. Just kind of control the game here and there and just say yes, no when I need to. And Jace is the only Planeswalker in the deck because he's one of the only Planeswalkers most people just don't really care about. They kind of just let it live. He doesn't really have this big target on his head. For instance, I would love to play the new Teferi Time Raveler to be able to tell my opponents that they can't cast spells during my turn, and I can cast spells during their turn. But the moment I play the 3-mana Planeswalker, like, this huge target just gets, you know, laser focused right onto my face, and I'm afraid that that is what's going to happen, and I'll just lose the Teferi anyway. Whereas with Jace, he stays on the battlefield, he draws me a couple cards, and he draws my opponent's cards, which they love, and then I get to go back to drawing me cards, which is important. The next card we're going to cross is Cunning Wish. My playgroup doesn't care about the sideboard, so I have a Cunning Wish in mind, to which I'll reveal a couple sideboard cards that I have chosen. And then I tell you, like, if you don't have a Cunning Wish, if your people don't like Cunning Wish, you would play X, probably one of these cards. One of the cards I've chosen to play is Naya Charm, the ability to bring back a card at instant speed is pretty huge from the graveyard in case it's ever needed, and that allows you to hold up a counter spell. Slumgar's Command is probably the card that I would play over this card anyway. It's very, very huge. Negate, return target permanents, kill a planeswalker, and then kill a creature. One of the better cards. Bant Charm is sweet. It does a lot of versatile things. That's what you're going to find out with the sideboard is options, to which we'll find another Incendious Wheel. This one is counter target spell. You may choose, or you may choose a new target for target spell, or you can copy a spell. Again, it's all about options. You also find I've got Pull from Tomorrow in my sideboard, which allows me to draw more cards. So that's in there. You're going to find a Commit to Memory. Again, options. It lets you do two things. That's kind of what we're looking for. Fated Retribution is a field wipe. It's a very good thing to have in your sideboard in case you just want your Cunning Wish to be a field wipe. It's there for your option, along with Aether Spouts to be able to put any attacking creatures back on the top of their library. It's really sweet as well. Those are the current cards I have in my sideboard. I'm pretty sure I'm a little short on the number because I believe it's 10 and we're sitting at 8. One day I'll figure out 2 more cards, but that's currently what we have at the moment. If your playgroup doesn't let you play with sideboards, that's fine. Just pick a card you like a lot, whether that be the Slumgar's Command that I suggested, or any of the cards that were also mentioned here. But you can just play anything else, maybe a Ponder, Brainstorm, any kind of other filtering cards is pretty sweet as well. From there, you're going to find a couple new additions that I've added to the deck here lately. We're going to play Clear the Mind. In this spot, I used to play Life from the Loam to be able to get back all of my gates that would ever get destroyed. I have decided to change things around a little bit, and I'm going to play Clear the Mind. It's going to shuffle my library back in, and then I can just go get them again eventually. And it's also going to let me draw a card. It also lets me read by all of my wonderful spells that are here in the graveyard. After this, you're going to have As Foretold. As Foretold is sweet. If there's anything this deck wants to do, it wants to play more spells on my opponent's turns more often. And this card lets me do this. It lets me play a spell during each one of their turns, and it's free. So I don't even have to pay mana for it. Huge card. It might be a little slow at times, but if it sticks around long enough, this card is my Seaborn Muse, and it will just take over the game. We got a K-Grip because sometimes you just need to get rid of enchantments and artifacts without people trying to stop you. This card just says no. We're going to hit one of our big artifact explosion spells here. O-Stone, huge for the deck. It lets me do just a lot of different things. It lets me protect some of my enchantments that I play. If you've noticed already, we've already come across a couple enchantments in here in the 3-drops, and then a couple artifacts in the 2-drops and 1-drop slots. O-Stone lets me keep those around and let my opponent not progress their board at the same time. By being able to put counters on it, it's very, very huge. And then we're going to find a Mortify. This is the actual art of my particular Mortify. Sweet art. Destroy target creature or enchantment. Again, options for this deck are huge, and that's what this card does. We'll move on to the 4-drop slot. We're going to find a couple more mass explosion spells. The Boom Boom part of Baby Boom Boom. Perilous Vault, being able to exile, is huge. Day of Judgment. And then you're going to have Nefali's Disc. I can't even say the name right. Don't quote me. All these cards are great because they blow up literal everything. They're not specific. And then the Disc and the Vault are even better because they're going to hit artifacts and enchantments. Sometimes those cards can be annoying for you. These are ways to get rid of them. Afterwards, you're going to run into the Supreme Verdict, which is one of the cards I just now noticed, is another one of these mass field wipes. It literally has the sideboards on it can't be countered. This is great for this deck because when I want to fight over things that I want to happen. If my opponent has, put too much on the board and I don't like it, I get to say no and literally just look at them and say, you can't stop this. This is happening. Great card for this deck. Followed by an Utter End. Sometimes this deck has problems with problematic permanents, whether they be planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments. I can get rid of creatures very well from this deck, but enchantments can be problems. Planeswalkers can be huge problems for this deck. So having an Utter End that can get rid of just about anything is huge. Not to mention that it also exiles and gets rid of it for good. We're going to move into the Tempt for Discovery. This is a really sweet ramp spell. It lets me go and get mazes in. That was another reason for this card entering into the deck. Its ability to go get any land out of the deck is great. So Tempt Discovery makes the cut mainly for that reason. Plus it also could be a double ramp spell on 4 if one of my other opponents wants to graciously allow me to have another land in play. We're going to hit our other green spell here, Scape Shift. Scape Shift is one of the pseudo win cons of the deck. The deck doesn't have very many win cons. You'll look over and you'll be like, well, how does the deck actually win? Well, Mazes In is its main win con, and Scape Shift allows this to happen at a very rapid speed. Once I'm able to hit, I believe 11 lands, one of them can be the Mazes In play. I'm able to activate the Mazes In and then I'm able to float the mana, leave the Mazes In untapped, cast the Scape Shift, get all the gates, and then activate the Mazes In and just win the game there. It happens really fast and it ends the game in a hurry. So this is one of the cards that are essential to producing a quicker win rate. Alright, and then we're going to hit Master's Acquisition. This is a really sweet card. It also lets us dig into our sideboard, along with the fact that it's a tutor. Again, this is another one of those cards that has options, and this is another one of these cards where I want to play at instant speed. Also, playing instant speed Scape Shift is fantastic. So this is another reason why we're going to find our As Foretold, our Alchemist Refuges, our Brain in the Jars, to be able to play cards for free and to be able to play them at instant speed at times pertaining to whichever particular card. And then we've got our Leyline of Anticipation, which is fantastic for this deck, again for the same reasons we were just mentioning. To be able to play our sorcery spells for instant speed is huge, to be able to give us options and hold cards up for when we need to have them open. We're going to hit a couple counter spells here in Overwhelming Denial and Devious Cover-Up. I'm going to talk about the Denial first, and it won't be a very long talk because it literally just says counter target spell cannot be countered. If I were to play another spell, however, in response to something else or before the spell, I get to cast it for only 2 minutes, so this becomes an uncounterable counter spell. Very, very huge for this deck that just wants its cards to resolve and to be able to tell their opponent that is trying to win the game, no sir, no ma'am, you do not get to win this game right now. I am going to stop you. So, uncounterable counterspell, huge. Devious Cover-Up is a newer addition that I've made to the deck. I typically do not like 4-mana counterspells because, again, I want to be able to play 2 spells in one turn. And Devious and 4-mana counterspells don't really let me do that too well, because I'll tap out 4 and then I'll have to find some other mana to do other things. However, we've chosen to add Devious Cover-Up to the deck for its other extra benefits of being able to be a pseudo-type win con for us. Basically, we can take the draft element that happened in Ravnica, this newer set of Ravnica, and be able to say, alright, well, I'm going to counter your spell. I'm going to put the top 4 cards in my graveyard back into my library, and one of them that I'm hoping them to be is, of course, this Clear the Mind that we went over for. So a Clear the Mind with a Devious Cover-Up is going to prevent me from ever milling, which then gets me to keep playing the game longer and longer and longer, and to the inevitability of being able to say I've won the game. Also, Devious Cover-Up lets us put any destroyed guild gates from my graveyard back into my library, so that I can be able to search them out again for Maze. Again, options for this deck are huge. Devious Cover-Up allows a couple different options. Next card is going to be a couple card advantage or selection cards with Mystical Teachings and Deep Analysis. Mystical Teachings obviously lets us get a lot of the major cards in this deck. A lot of these are instants, and this lets us do just about anything. The ability to go get 2 of them is huge. Again, more options. Deep Analysis is one of the same things, just gives us some velocity, gets us more cards, helps us get to the later game, and helps us draw cards we might actually need. Also, the Flashback, huge. This card lets us draw 4 cards, and only a cheap mana of 6 as a total, and I can spread it out through time, so that's really, really big. And then we're going to move on to our 5 slot. We're going to find that there is an Hour of Promise in the deck, and this card lets me go search for 2 land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped. And then if I control 3 or more deserts, I get to create 2 zombies. I only have 1 desert in the deck. It is the Scavenging Ground, but the reason this particular card makes the cut is because its ability to go get 2 gates, or even mazes in. This card lets me go get 2 land cards. It doesn't care that they're basics, doesn't care that they're duels, doesn't care that they're of any other, point to them. They just are lands. And as long as I can get gates, the card is going to make the cut. So being able to play 5 mana and get 2 more gates to reamp is huge. Again, if I can get to 11 mana and I have Escape Ship in hand, game's over. So that's the goal, is just to get up to as many lands as I can possible. Again, mana advantage over everyone else is another big deal. So this card does all those things. The next card is going to be a Dark Petition. This is another tutor card. This is another one of these cards that I kind of want to run at instant speed, so another one of the reasons why Ley Lines Alchemist Refuge is very huge. I have not, as you'll see, there is no 2 mana Demonic Tutor in this deck. It's just not what I really wanted to do for this particular deck, and the Demonic Tutor is in another deck. So I've chosen to play all these other ones. This one specifically is pretty neat because of the Spell Mastery part. I get to use that. This card is always basically a Demonic Tutor in this deck. So it's pretty neat that I get to use this card over all the other ones, and I'm not copying myself, which was one of the goals of the deck building process. Very neat card, lets me tutor for anything, and then it's going to give me 3 mana afterwards. Here in the next 2 slots, we're going to find 2 blue cards. Mystic Confluence and Desertion. Again, I did mention that I don't really like high counterspell cards, but these 2 particular cards allow options, and again, the deck is all about options. So with Mystic Confluence, its ability to do 3 different modes is super huge. So this card could be a draw 3 card, or a counterspell draw a card type card, so it definitely makes the cut. Some people may ask, well, where is my Cryptic Command? Well, triple blue can be a little difficult sometimes for the deck, so we've chosen not to particularly play Cryptic Command just yet. I'm not a brave enough person. Maybe one day that might happen. But Mystic Confluence is huge. It does a lot of different options. It can be a great card. The next card we're going to see is Desertion. I randomly came across a beautiful promo, beautiful foil of this card. It looks just like this. Therese did a wonderful job. I believe it was Therese. Beautiful artwork here, and the moment I saw it, I was like, I gotta add this card to a deck. And this was the deck I chose it to be in, again, because this card does multiple things. 1, it counters a spell, and 2, it gets me one of their permanents. And whether that even be their commander, which is huge, because there's not many ways to actually get rid of a commander other than just continuously counterspelling them or killing them. This card right here lets me take their commander indefinitely, or whatever broken artifact or creature that they were about to play anyway, and I get to take it. Very huge for the deck. Here in the 6 mana slot, we're going to run across 4 cards. A lot of them are removal spell cards. You've got your Asturi command. It does a lot of different things. Again, options. And the neat thing is this is one of those other cards that you want to be playing at instant speed. Again, the reasons for the other card choices in the deck. You're going to have Terminus here, 1 mana, just put all the creatures on the bottom. Fantastic card in the deck. You'll find a lot of times that you are going to be mystical tutoring for Terminus to then be able to get them. That's also pretty neat with the legacy, the way that it used to be with top. You can always mystical tutor, put it on top, and then use top to draw the card, and boom, there's a Terminus right there whenever you need it. The other card we play is Merciless Eviction. Options, and even more options. This card is fantastic at instant speed. I cannot tell you how good this card is. However, it is a sorcery, but with the deck decisions that we made earlier, we're able to play this instant speed a lot of the time, and this card is fantastic. It also answers a lot of our problematic permanents of enchantments, artifacts, and planeswalkers. Boom. This card does it all. And then we're going to hit Seasons Pass. Seasons Pass is a fantastic card for this deck. I would consider it one of the win cons of this deck, because if our opponent can't beat us, they can't win the game. That is kind of one of our goals as far as once we move past the mazes in. This card is going to let us draw sometimes between 4 to 8 cards for one spell. And this is kind of one of the reasons why we can hit back to me planning to play Nile Spellbomb over any other card. The 1-drop slot is low, and so I decided to put the Artifact Hate in the 1-drop slot to be able to get it back with Seasons Past as well. Just another little tinkering and thought process that goes along with the deck building, because Seasons Past is such a powerful card. We get to play the little combo of Seasons Past and Dark Petition that was from Standard a few years back. And then it can also be done with Master's Mind Acquisition. Dark Petition being the better one because it provides us 3 mana to go with it. So with Seasons Past, I'll give a quick read here. It lets me return any number of cards with different converted mana cost from your graveyard to your hand, and I get pushing Seasons Past on the bottom of the library. From there, if I have a Dark Petition that I just used from the graveyard, or a Master's Mind Acquisition, or even a Mystical Tutor, which I can do it with as well, I'm then able to dig the Seasons Past out from the bottom of my library and then put it back into my hand or said top of my library to draw again for the next turn. So I get to continuously loop Seasons Past over and over and over again. It's very, very neat, and it basically is going to let me draw somewhere between, again, I mentioned it, 4 plus cards for just this one card. The neat thing is so let's say I Dark Petition to go get it, the Seasons Pass then gets back to Dark Petition, the Dark Petition gets back to Seasons Pass, and that is the loop that was mentioned, that I was mentioning before. Again, I think this is to be considered one of the win cons for the deck, because again, as I mentioned, if you can't lose, they can't win. And being able to buy all of your fantastic spells here, sometimes you get back 5 counter spells, and maybe let's see, we can get back 1, 2, 3, 4. We can get back 5 counter spells, and then just counter each person's spell each turn. So it's all about making sure we have enough mana to do all of this thing, and that's why there was ramp in the deck earlier. So move on from there. We're gonna hit a couple sweet cards of Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise. These 2 cards are basically essential for the deck, because not only are they card selection and card draw, which the deck wants, but they also do this weird thing of being able to get Child back into the command zone. And that's one of the reasons why I figured out what that missing card was. It's one of the reasons why Delve spells are pretty important for this deck. Oh, that's actually over there. Because it allows me to let Child go to the graveyard, which in order to get Child to basically destroy everything, it has to go to the graveyard. It can't go to the command zone, it's got to go back into the graveyard. So when it goes into the graveyard, I don't, as you can look over the deck, I have no other way to bring it back into play or put it back into my command zone other than delving it away, changing its zones, essentially. So I'll change the zone from graveyard to exile, to which then at that point I'm able to take it, instead of going from exile, and take it and put it back into my command zone. So it's a pretty neat way of putting Child back into where it belongs so that I can cast it again, and not having to play things like recursion spells, but be able to play more draw card spells. So it's very neat. I believe my other card is a Murderous Cut, because as we can see, I'm only sitting at 98. I think my other card is a Murderous Cut, so that's another Delve card. There we go. Alright, Murderous Cut is a destroy target creature, and it delves. So it's a very sweet card for the deck, because again, as I mentioned, and that's another reason why I will find Logic Knot in here as well. It's a counter spell that lets me put Child back into the deck. Can't ask for more. And then we're going to hit Approach to the Second Suns. This is the second win con for the deck. The card says if this spell is cast from your hand and you've cast another spell named Approach to the Second Suns this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach to the Second Suns into the graveyard, 7th from the top, and then you gain 7 life. We try to set up a board state where we can just cast this card, put it 7 cards, and then either Dig Through Time it back, draw cards, or just wait, and then cast the card again, and then we just end the game. The deck, as we can see, as I've hit the last slots of the the deck, I can very easily tell you that the deck only has about 4 win cons in it. One of them is the Approach from the Second Suns. The next one being obviously the Mazes Inn. Also, I told you earlier that Seasons Past I consider to be one of the win cons because again, you can't lose. If your opponent can't win, you can't lose, so you're still winning. And then the last one being the Child of Alara beats, if that ever happens. It is an option. Those are the ways that you have to be able to finish this game. And the deck kind of lets you recirculate a lot of different cards. Let's say Approach the Second Suns gets countered both times of some sorts. You're able to get it back from the graveyard to play it again. Mazes Inn was to die, you're able to get it back, play it again. All those neat fun things. Another card in my sideboard is going to be a card that lets me buy something from exile. So that's one of the other 2 remaining slots from the sideboard, is to find an instant that does that. And I think there's one maybe somewhere, never. But to be able to pull things back from exile is very sweet. So those are the 4 win cons of the deck: the Approach, the Mazes Inn, the Child beats, and then the can't lose the game with Seasons Past. You're basically going to try and set up a board state to do one of those 4 things. And then you'll just take over the game, and then you'll watch your opponents just wonder how in the world they just lost. From there, we're going to hit the Logic Knot that we had mentioned earlier, and a couple other card advantage cards to finish off the deck. Blue Sun, Diabolical Revelations, and Sphinx's Rev. Diabolical Rev is another tutor card, and the only reason it makes this particular slot is because of the ability of the deck to play at instant speed. To be able to go instant speed Diabolical Revelations for 3 cards is absolutely huge. Deck wants to play at instant speed anyway, and then just having this card that this card is by far more powerful than Blue Sun and Sphinx's Rev, especially when I get to cast it at instant speed. Instead of picking 3 to 4 random cards, I get to take the 3 exact cards I want, and I'm able to finish a game out based upon those 3 cards I pick most of the time. This card's fantastic. I know it gets a lot of slack because it costs so much, but being able to play it at instant speed definitely makes it worth the slot. Well, that goes over basically every card decision of the deck. If anyone has any questions or comments again, please feel free to drop them into the chat or the comment section below in the YouTube for you YouTubers. But this is my personal EDH deck. This is my baby Boom Boom deck. Things literally go boom boom, and I love every bit of this. This is a very personalized deck. For me, I have a lot of feeling to this one. And again, I'll go over quick rules that we made. Again, you won't find any big land destruction spells in my EDH decks. You again won't find any taking turn cards in any of my EDH. Our play group just doesn't like it. It's not fun. So we've set a little bit of rules, and then the one rule I set for myself again is a deck limit restriction of I'm not going to play a lot of the same cards across all of my EDH decks. And as you'll find, I have actually quite a lot of EDH decks. So to be able to build all these EDH decks without using a lot of the same cards is pretty huge. Well, but with that all being said, this is my first EDH decks given. This is also my first stream coming from the Dragon's Lairs live show. This is pretty sweet. We're going to be doing a couple more of these here lately. We're going to have a little bit of a talk show, a little bit of a deck tech show, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's going to be a lot of conversations coming out of the Dragon's Lair. For those that don't know, the Dragon's Lair is the Discord channel through which sponsors the stream here. If you haven't done it already, swing by. The link is down below in the descriptions below. Swing by, go ahead and join this Discord. It's a pretty sweet place, getting it to grow, getting it to do pretty awesome things. Any more information about me is listed up at the top. Other than that, I thank you guys for your time. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and I'll be back with some more other personalized EDH decks.